Good evening. Welcome to HeartBeat Special, All Things Black. I'm Cindi Bright. You know me as the host of HeartBeat Radio and Podcast, and I'm thrilled to be here this evening live on Converge Media, Black Media TV here in the Seattle area. Ballots are dropping tomorrow, and with this comes the need to have conversations with our business community, focusing on advancing Black people and our elected officials working on our community's behalf. This election across the country is too important and too much is on the line for our communities. Our future as Black people can and must be different. That can be no argument for that. Black communities deserve and demand thoughtful, visionary policies and practices that make us powerful in every aspect of our lives. We deserve more than small incremental steps that will never gain equity with this current movement. This evening, we are grateful for our community leaders, our business leaders, and our elected officials who are joining us this evening for this discussion. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce who our guests are this evening. Let me start with elected officials. I want to first recognize that we have 5 elected officials on with us this evening. Our first one is Carolyn Payne. She is the president of the Seattle-King County NAACP. So let's welcome Carolyn Payne into our show.
Gotta be on already.
How are you this evening? Good. Next, we have the chair of the Black Caucus out of Olympia. She is Representative Jamila Taylor. She is the representative in the 30th District, which is the Federal Way area, serving as our chair of the Black Caucus, as I've said. Welcome, Jamila, back to HeartBeat. Nice to see you this evening.
Thank you for having me this evening. I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you. We also have 3 of our senators. Let me introduce Senator Patty Kuderer. She is out of the 48th District, which is Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond. Senator Kuderer, welcome back to HeartBeat. Nice to see you this evening.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Cindi.
Our next senator is Senator Manka Dhingra. She is out of the 45th District, Sammamish, Issaquah area, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Welcome to HeartBeat, Senator Dhingra.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. And it's Kirkland, Redmond, Duval, and Sammamish.
Thank you for that. And last but not least, Senator Claire Wilson. She is also out of the 30th District, the Federal Way area. Welcome to HeartBeat, Senator Wilson.
Thanks so much, and it's wonderful to be here tonight.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. We probably need your mic a little closer next when we bring you on. And we also have some business people with us here. I'm thrilled to introduce Craig Dawson. He is out of our business community. Craig is the president of Retail Lockbox. It's his own business. He is the chair of Washington Roundtable, which is corporate America. And he's also the president of Black Business Warehouse. Craig has been on with us in the past. Welcome back to HeartBeat, Craig. Nice to see you this evening. You are muted, Craig.
Cindi, thanks for having me here today. Excited to be here. Looking forward to talking about equity for Black Washingtonians.
Yes, we are. And last but not least, let's introduce Sean Good. He is the executive director of Choose 180. Choose 180 is an organization that is focused on systemic change through the power of choice. I hope I've said that correctly, Sean. Welcome to HeartBeat this evening.
Cindi, it's a pleasure to be able to be in space with you this evening, and you said it wonderfully. Thank you kindly.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Most of you have been on my shows in the past, and so you know that I like to delve in and talk about the heart of the matter, hence why I call it HeartBeat, but the issues that are impacting Brown and Black people in our community. And as I said in the intro, the need to deserve and demand more progressive policies for our communities is at stake right now. And so across this country, we are looking at elected people running for office on platforms, but we really want to make sure that the platforms here in Washington State are working for Black people here. So tonight is focused on public policy and issues around Black people. I want to start off, I want to invite the president of the NAACP, Carolyn Payne, to give our community an overview of what is happening at the NAACP, what are some of the issues that the organization has been focused on. We'd love to hear what's on your plate right now, Carolyn. I think are you muted? Can you hear me, Carolyn? Okay, I just heard you. We can hear you now. All right, let me start off with Jamila then. Let me pivot to the chair of the Black Caucus and let her get us started tonight and talk about Jamila. Hi, nice to see you again. You are running for your second term as a representative in the 30th district, and you have served as the chair of the Black Caucus. Can you give us an overview of, in the last legislative session, what the Black Caucus focused on? And will you talk to us about what is the priorities for the Black Caucus going in the 2023 session, if you've determined that?
Well, what I will say is that we have prioritized in the last two sessions supporting Black Washingtonians fully and completely. Let me give an overview of the focus of the Legislative Black Caucus. Our mission is to ensure that the experience, needs, and solutions of Black people throughout Washington state are represented, prioritized, and made real in our legislative process and policies. So you can imagine that is a whole mouthful of how do we show up and for community and with community among our colleagues in the legislature. And we envision a state where Black individuals, families, and communities no longer face anti-Blackness, and that they know that they have access to opportunity and resources that they need to have true equity and thrive. And we value and center integrity, equity, and justice in all of our work. And we advocate collectively with our neighbors in solidarity for policy change that is firmly rooted in our diverse Black history, culture, and resilience. So that all means that we want to change the dynamic and make sure that folks understand that our needs need to be heard and addressed. And a lot of times what happens is that policies that are important to the Black community get conflated with other issues in terms of race equity or gender equity or other really important issues, but they don't hyper focus on the unique needs of the Black community. And so in the last legislative session, the two sessions, the first and foremost, we prioritized the package of police accountability bills. And it was important for us to ensure that we are repairing the relationship for law enforcement and community. This is what community sent us there to do. These package of bills work together to set clear expectations of officer behavior, set a baseline for the acceptable use of force, tactics, and equipment, and put systems of accountability and transparency in place. And we are unique among all the states in this package of bills. And we already know that the attacks are coming from folks who want to roll us back to 1973. They want to roll us back to a time when incarceration first, lock you up, and never think about you ever again is what some folks want to do. But community, Black community in particular, needs to be brought forth in terms of healing, as in inclusion and economic development. And so we can't be seen as simply the reason for all the challenges in community. There's just a lot of people who are using dog whistles to say we are the cause of all kinds of problems. And that's just not the case. In 2022, we decided to, in addition to supporting our police accountability bills, we wanted to make sure that we were supporting healthcare equity and access and wellness. Mental health is critical in our communities. Maternal health care is also important in our communities. As we see that medical racism, we're showing and highlighting that it's a real thing. And in particular, as a Black woman, I faced it, and I know some of my other colleagues have as well. But some of our legislative wins have been in solidarity with our partners. We increased renter protections and rental and utility assistance. We expanded college-bound scholarship opportunities. We worked on the working families tax credit. And we wanted to ensure that our kids, when they were going to school, that they wouldn't have a need to pay the copay. Diversity, equity, and inclusion training for school staff and other industries is critical to ensure that folks understand that the lived experience is not singularly focused on one narrative. And of course, our neighbors absolutely need to have more affordable childcare options. This is the way that we'll have an inclusive economic recovery that supports Black-owned businesses and BIPOC-owned businesses, and those who are re-entering the workforce after such a challenging time with the pandemic.
Thank you, Representative Taylor. I appreciate that you are raising those issues. We are going to dive deeper into some of those issues as we move along throughout the show. Let me check back in with Carolyn Payne and see if she is equipped to speak to the community regarding the work of the NAACP. Carolyn, are you there?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you if you're talking to me, Cindy. This is Carolyn.
I am talking to you. Is it my voice? Can you hear me now? All right. Let me keep moving and see if we can get our technical glitches worked out with Carolyn. Representative Taylor, you listed several of the topic areas that I wanted to dive into today. Let me just start. Let me bring Craig Dawson in. Craig is, as I introduced, he is the president and CEO of Retail Lockbox. He's also the chair of the Washington Roundtable, which is corporate America, and he's also the president of Black Business Warehouse. Hi, Craig. Can you hear me? I can see you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Would you please give an overview of all of the two buckets, the Washington Roundtable, the work that's going on there, and also will you talk to us about Black Business and Black Business Warehouse and where we are with those things? The reason I'm going there right there is because of the issues that Representative Taylor raised, because I think there's some parallels there. So could you just give us an overview of those two areas?
Sure. So I think it starts, with what Representative Taylor was talking about, but it's an educational gap, an income gap, an equity gap, which leads to a generational wealth gap. The Washington Roundtable, and I'm actually the immediate past chair, still a director, and have been on the Roundtable for since 2000. But it's the largest 50 businesses in the state of Washington, including folks like Amazon and Microsoft and Boeing, and they elected me the chair last year for 2021. Where we got to really was a place where we created a coalition to provide equity for Black Washingtonians. So 59 firms started a coalition called the Washington Employers for Racial Equity. I'm the co-chair of that. And that really is these firms coming together, their CEOs at the very tops of the organizations coming together and saying, whatever we've been trying to do over the last 50 years, last 400 years to bring equity to Black Washingtonians, to Black Americans hasn't worked. Big business can come in and actually do what they do best, which is look at a problem and solve that problem. And so those 59 firms that started Washington Employers for Racial Equity, it's called WEIR, the short name, really said, we're gonna come together and we're gonna pledge basically $2 billion over the next 5 years to help Black Washingtonians get to equity. And it's not just, hey, a dollar pledge, we're going to put $2 billion out there, but each organization said, we're going to do these things within our organization to drive equity for Black Washingtonians. We took all of those initiatives, if you will, things that these businesses were doing, and we put those together. And it really comes around 5 things for the business community. It's really hiring Black people, buying from Black firms, getting Blacks into the C-suite and on boards, educating our Black kids, and then finding the best organizations in the social realm to support those organizations. So that's really the work of the Washington Roundtable, Challenge Seattle, in conjunction with the new coalition called Washington Employers for Racial Equity. Black business today in
Craig,
the state of
can I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure.
While we're on that topic, I want to just go a little bit deeper into
Sure.
The 5 areas that you talked about with the corporate America. And I don't know if you've seen this. It just came out this week, so I'm not trying to blindside you, but I just read this article about the billions of dollars that corporate America, that companies have promised post the George Floyd. And it's actually a study that was done by Korn Ferry. I think you probably know who they are. And it's actually really interesting because it talks about, I don't know if you've seen it. First off, let me ask that question
I've
first.
not seen it, but I'm sure I know
Okay.
what it's about.
Yeah, it's just interesting about what they are stating in the article. There's several points that they're making, one of which is that this really is not a hiring issue. They're talking about the fact that they quote the statistic. I know you are really good at statistics. I've had you on my show where you've talked about some of that data, but they're referring to the fact that the issue in corporate America with respect to Black people has to do with the development of people inside of organizations, not the hiring of them. And so I just kind of wanted to probe that a little bit with you about, what are you hearing from some of the CEOs on the roundtable that are talking about the actual development of Black people there? So.
Well, I think the firms that are committed to this work are trying to develop Black people. They've got programs in place. You say it doesn't start with hiring, but it really does. If a lot of these organizations don't have a population of Black people within their company that represents the county or the state that they live in, so they don't have 7% Black in their organizations in many of the King County, Greater Seattle area, which is the population. What you have to do is you have to get a critical mass of people that look like us, and then you have to retain those people, and you have to do that by creating an environment that is welcoming and one that does listen, and then promotes those folks through the organization over a period of time. And it's got to be sort of a regular promotion, just like, hey, you're in this job for 2 years and now you move up to your next position. You need to have mentors in that organization. And you need to be focused on creating an environment where Black people can grow within the organization and have a voice.
And there's kind of I'm just going to call it a movement, for those of us who quasi live on social media. There's a movement on LinkedIn, for example, with particularly Black women that have opted out of even trying into the organizations. Many of them are talking about and sharing what I would characterize as abuse that is happening towards them inside of organizations. And so is it fair to say, for the people that are either there and needing to be developed, that we have another engine inside of business that is harming or not allowing people past middle management ranks? I mean, saying it different, rising up to middle management, I think there's opportunity, but when you get to the middle management and going up further, which is where equity, the bigger bucks are earned inside of corporate America, those opportunities become smaller to obtain. And so there's there's a point of view, and it's a pretty aggressive one on social platforms, that Black people, Black women, are being taken out at that level, either intentionally by other women, and or they are opting out because they don't want to be a part of the toxicity that's going on inside of these organizations. Is that a fair assumption that I'm describing to you? Do you hear those kind of conversations in your work?
Well, I think the proof is in the numbers. You don't have a lot of Black people in in middle management, and then you don't have a lot of people that move up to senior management positions. And so, you know, I, I think the numbers speak for themselves. But the George Floyd killing was a flashpoint. It shone a light on the problem, but it didn't change people necessarily within the middle of those organizations who have the power to hire, to promote, to create that, a positive work environment to move people up. There are a number of organizations that are doing a great job in promoting Black people and bringing Black people in, and then giving them a pathway. And there's a number of organizations who are just giving it lip surface, and you've got people within those organizations who are roadblocks. So in those middle areas where you're talking about the difference between promoting that Black person, woman or man, and promoting that white person, woman or man, 99% of the time in the past, they promoted the white person for X number of reasons. And so what we've got to do is got to get to that change point where we have the opportunity to really promote those Black people at that level. And that's one of the goals of Washington Employers Racial
Thank you.
Equity.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let me just quickly show just another overlay of a study that just came out this last week on companies that hire Black CEOs and the fact that their stock jumps. And so they talk to, you can see on camera here, this is our former Rosalind Brewer here out of Starbucks. She's now the CEO of, is it Walgreens, Walmart, maybe, right? It just talks about the fact that it's a provocative article because it does highlight the difference between Black candidates and white candidates, and the fact that Black people are aggressively more qualified for these positions than their white counterparts that are occupying these positions. And it shows the financial outperformance and the value to corporate America when Black CEOs are in charge. Let me pivot. Craig, you were also going to introduce the Black business information in the warehouse. So I'll let you continue with that.
Okay, sure. So the really the question that came from CEOs as we educated them on what the issues were for Black Washingtonians around equity, around the income gap, around generational wealth, around health, was, hey, I can't find Black businesses to buy from. I can't find Black people to hire. So we created the Black Business Warehouse really to go alongside Washington Employers for Racial Equity to answer that very question. So the warehouse is a clearinghouse of information about Black business and about Black people. Our customers are those 59 businesses, now 74 businesses that are part of the Washington Employers for Racial Equity Coalition. And what we do is we've gone out and basically brought in really the largest Black businesses in the state of Washington and Oregon, and we help those companies get contracts with what we're calling the major business enterprises or our trading partners. And today there's 15 trading partners. We have 60 Black businesses that we represent. Those 60 Black businesses have a combined $400 million in sales and roughly 2,000 employees. And we're well down the road of getting those companies more business and getting them opportunities actually on the side to be able to get money for them to grow their businesses. So banking relationships, getting them capital. And then we just recently in July started our talent agency. So the second leg of the stool really is getting Black people jobs within these organizations. And so we've started a talent agency, an employment agency in July, and we're beginning to move Black people into these organizations.
Yeah, thank you for that. While you're talking about that, let me just give a shout out to Ollie Garrett also at this moment. Ollie of Tabor 100 that also focuses on Black business and has done a stellar job of helping Black businesses and Black people gain employment as well. So thank you, Craig, for that piece. I'm going to go to a commercial break really quick, and then we're going to pick up and dive back into some of the other issues that we want to talk about tonight. So stay with me for a couple of minutes. We're going to be right back.
Get ready, everyone. October 24th and 25th, Converge Media is heading right back to the Paramount Theater. Join me, Besa Gordon, Eric Calligraphy, Trey Holiday, and the entire Converge Media family as we once again broadcast live with conversations on art, culture, mental health, community issues, and more. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. Head over to whereweconverge.com for more information, and we will see you October 24th and 25th, streaming live across all Converge Media platforms.
Community, it's been 3 years since we've been able to celebrate in person at our annual Evening of Choice. And this year at Access in Pioneer Square on October 19th at 6 p.m., we will be back together again, celebrating our journey, healing towards justice. This past couple of years have been incredibly difficult for our young people and our community at large. And one thing that has become clear and absolutely true is there's one way forward that brings all of us together, and that's as we heal. And when our young people heal, they're truly able to become who it is they've been purposed to be. So on this evening, you'll hear stories of our young people, hear the evolution of our organization as we emphasize healing in our cause. And together we will celebrate another year of impact and growth as we journey towards justice together. Again, it's at Access in Pioneer Square, 6 p.m. on October 19th, and live streaming will be available through YouTube at I Choose 180.
Basically, fam, believe in giving. Like, we have to be willing to give more, and people seem to always think giving means money, but nah, bro. It's like you can give time, you can give understanding, you can give access, you can give a listening ear and an open heart. You can give and share your God-given gifts and talents, but you just got to give.
Welcome back to HeartBeat Special, All Things Black. I am your host for this evening, Cindi Bright, here on Converge Media. Thank you for joining us this evening in this conversation. Let me go back to the president of the NAACP, Carolyn Payne, and let me see if I can bring her in and see if we can hear her and get a quick overview from her about the work of the NAACP.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was determined I was going to make it tonight, Cindy. I'm now on my, the good old iPhone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. The Seattle King County NAACP has been very, very busy in this last year, ever since George Floyd. And right now, we're in the process of doing voter registration, what we need to do to get out the vote. Not only registration, but we're educating people who to vote for or what to look for. We're having forums. We're having a debate this Thursday on some of the campaigns around that we think are very important, i.e. the prosecutor's election. That election is, the prosecuting determines our lives. And so we want people to understand what they stand for and what they're going to do for Black people once they get in office. Because one of them has been in that office for 25 years. So what's going to be different? So it's those kinds of discussions and conversations we're trying to have in the community. We are still doing our youth program, our AXO program, taking children across to the national convention to compete in the academic Olympics. This year we had 2 winners. We took some students and we came back with 2 medals. We continue to be competitive nationwide. We have, let's see what else. We're in the midst of getting new officers for the organization. I'm encouraging all members, if you're not a member, you have a few days to become a member so that you can vote. But we're looking for people that are interested in moving this organization forward. And so this Thursday, I think, is the deadline to register and become a member of the organization. So we're looking for people to vote. It's still a volunteer organization, and people are still hurting. We still get calls every day about people who are losing their jobs. We just saw that Microsoft laid off 1,000 people. People are losing their jobs and can't find jobs and feeling that they are being discriminated against. So we're still doing that. We're doing policy issues and just any and everything. We're still doing the mission.
And Carolyn, when you talk about we are going to talk about incarceration. I know when you talk about the King County prosecutor race, has the NAACP, it hosted a discussion between a candidate forum for the two candidates. Is that correct?
We had one already, and we're going to have another one. Yes.
Okay. When is the next one?
This Thursday. It's called the Battle of the Ballots.
Has the NAACP endorsed anybody yet?
No, we're nonpartisan, so we don't endorse.
Okay.
But we do. What we do is let the community know who's doing the work, who's doing things for the Black community. So that's the way we endorse or don't endorse. Yes.
Do you have a perspective about that this evening?
Well, I'm going to wait until Thursday before I give my for the battle of the ballots.
Yeah, just thought I would see if you would go there. Thank you for that. Thank you, Dan. Look, I do want to dive into issues of Black community. And so as I welcome in our legislators to talk about this, let me just set the stage for all of the things that we've heard Representative Taylor talk about, the issues that the Black Caucus has focused on. We hear President Carolyn Payne talk about the issues that the NAACP is focusing on. We've heard the president and the former chair, Craig Dawson, talk about what's happening in Black business. Underlying all of these issues to get Black community prospering, that underlying issue is education. And I want to start there this evening with some of the issues that I want to speak to. So I want to welcome in our elected officials who have been focusing on education. I want to welcome in Craig Dawson to have this conversation with us as well. And I'm actually going to start with Craig because education is impacting Black people, Black students, the ability to gain jobs, the ability to prosper in jobs. Craig, talk to us about what your observations are with education and how that is impacted in the business world. What is the trends? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from some of our executives? And then I'm going to welcome in our elected officials, all of our senators and Representative Taylor to join in this dialogue on education with us. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, it starts with expectation, right? I mean, you have so many people that start out by believing that Black people are less than and can't learn. And so we have all this watering down of standards in the legislature, really, right? We want to say, okay, well, we really need to teach this lowest common denominator, make sure these kids, feel good about themselves, and then just pass them on to the next grade. Really, we need to have high standards. We need to believe that if we start kids, in early childhood education, if we start them at the same level, if we start them with pre-K, we give them a great base, they can achieve at a very, very high level. They should be able to come out, graduate from 12 years of high school, of grade school, high school, and be either prepared for a vocational career, and a lot of those are technical. A lot of those careers make $100,000+, or be ready to go on to college and get a college degree. But what I see, and I am down the legislature. I've been over the last decade many times, legislators themselves talking about, oh, well, the kids can't achieve, so we've got to lower the standards. We've got to keep watering down these graduation requirements for these kids. No, we got to start with believing that all these kids can achieve at a very high level, and they're going to have to compete when they get out of high school, either where they go to a vocation or where they go on to college and get and have a degree job, that they can compete. And so, that's really what these businesses are looking for, what these CEOs are looking for. They're looking for great talent, and that's what's going to get promoted. Talent wins out.
Senator Wilson, are you in with us? You sit on the early pre-K, or is it K-12, early education. As you're hearing Craig discuss, the terms he's using is watering down expectations for Black students, the expectation of what it takes to, I'll use the word globally, compete in the business world. Can you give us an update or overview about the work of your committee and what is happening in the space of education? And I do invite Representative Taylor and any of the other senators, if you have perspective on this, raise your hand so we can bring you in to comment on it.
Okay, first I need to know, can you hear me if I hold my mic close?
Yes, I can hear you good. Thank you.
Excellent. And I just love the conversation, and I love what you just said, because there's not one thing I disagree with. What I will say is, before my time in the Senate, I sat on Federal Way School Board for 8 years, and we did a lot of work in the areas of academic acceleration and standards-based grading, because I think those are the things that we also need to look at as we think about education. Because for me, it's not about watering down, it's about lifting all students up, and that all students have the ability, but they also need the opportunity and the access to accelerate. I also agree wholeheartedly in early care and education, and passed a historic landmark Fair Start for Kids Act. Because if we look at return on investment, it's 12-1 if we start kids early. And it doesn't mean that we're doing things that are developmentally inappropriate. It means that we're giving kids the skills they need to be successful when they get into the K-12 system. I also think we need to look at our teacher pipeline, and we need to make sure that our young people have individuals in front of them that reflect the diversity of the students that they're teaching. And that's critically important as we think about connecting young people to real life experience, and also to pathways to, to graduation, and also to careers. So there's nothing that I disagree with. What I do say is, though, we have an institution of education and an institution of government, neither of which were really set up to help people succeed. Many cases, they were created just to keep people exactly where they were. So I hope you see me as a disruptor, as I've been there the last 4 years trying to make those changes. And really, it's not dumbing down anything. It's opening up, and it's looking at it through an equity lens, and also through a fiscal mapping lens, because you can say one thing, but unless the money follows what you're saying, you're not making the difference. I'll stop there because I could go on forever, but would love to continue the conversation, because this is exactly what we need to do, is provide resources and supports in public education, because that's where young people should get what they need to be successful.
Senator Dinger, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, and what I would love to say is, I represent an area which has Lake Washington School District, which, we have a lot of very high achievers. And so to me, it's not a question of or. I think you can absolutely have standards that make people excel. And I also think you have to take a look at those barriers that are a hindrance to people learning, like ensuring that our kids actually have food, because we know that if they come to school hungry, they don't have the ability to learn because they're hungry. We have to also make sure we are taking a look at adverse childhood experiences. If we know that a child is coming from a home where they experience domestic violence, if they come from a home where they're seeing substance use disorder, that those impact the abilities to learn. So I think we really want to be in a system where you're helping people achieve the most they can, at the same time ensuring that those who are struggling have a pathway to actually graduate high school, because we know that that degree from high school is critical. So to me, it's not about watering down, it's about making sure you have both, enabling people to excel, and helping those who are struggling.
Thank you. Senator Cooter, you had something to add to this as well?
Yes, I'll be brief. In our Constitution, education is our paramount duty. And there was a lawsuit called McCleary that, was filed because we weren't really funding adequately public education in our state. And I think everyone on this call here are, tremendous supporters of public education. So you're going to hear those who are very much interested in making sure we have the strongest possible education system for all of our students, as you heard my colleagues talk about. And so what we need to remember is that we're focused on making sure that students are either college or career ready. That is the goal of high school. We also know that if students do graduate from high school, they're less likely to end up in trouble with law enforcement. So this is really a very important issue, and we've never had this conversation about it. And we've dedicated to making sure that the educational system works for all of our students.
Senator Cooter, in your district, in the 48th district, there is currently activity, is what I'll call it, to bring back in student resource officers into the school system in Bellevue. And that's a very controversial topic. I guess my question is, why are we bringing student resource officers back into schools with the track record of what has happened to Black children? And do we assume that Black children are more dangerous than other students that are in the school system?
Again, very provocative and thoughtful questions. No, they're not more dangerous. And I know the data on school resource officers, and we also know about the disproportionate share of discipline that's meted out to students of color. And we also know what that leads to. Sometimes it leads to suspension and expulsion. And that, again, is the school pipeline that we've been talking about. Now, we passed, last year, we passed legislation to fund increase in mental health counselors and school nurses, and we restricted that funding to that purpose. Because what we had seen is that there were some school districts, and remember, our education system is decentralized. The decision makers really lie at the school board level. That's why those elections are so critical. But we had restricted that funding so that there would be adequate mental health counselors and nurses available to our students as they recover from the effects of the pandemic. So we have a ways to go, and I'm certainly open to discussions about that. My personal feeling about school resource officers is that I think we need less of them and more of the other supports that go along with a fully functional educational system.
Thank you. And Representative Taylor, I know you had your hand up. I want to ask you a couple of questions and then invite your comments. My questions for you, Representative Taylor, is what does the community want for our children? And let me say that different, because I think there is a perspective that the legislators are working an agenda. And I'm asking the question, does that agenda actually reflect what the community, the Black community, wants for its children? So that's question number one. And the second question I have is, what work are we doing in the legislature around obtaining global majority? The global majority in this world is brown and Black. What are we doing to obtain and get more teachers of color in our school districts?
Well, I think we have to focus on how are folks able to show up in terms of contribution of ideas and advocacy for us in the legislature. One of the ways that that happens is electing folks who reflect your values. And we have 10 members of the Legislative Black Caucus who are hearing from various parts of the Black community. There is no one monolith of the Black community. Some issues that I've been hearing is that, despite, graduating from high school, wanting to go to college or post-secondary opportunities, there's a pipeline that forces some of our young people right out, that they can't afford to go to college. They can't afford to even consider schools that are not in this region where they feel it's not a good match for them. For example, many of our young people want to go to an HBCU. I'm a proud HBCU graduate of Virginia State University, but that would be an incredible burden on some families to send their kids 3,000 miles away. That's not an opportunity that they see for themselves, but that's an environment where they might want to go. I also think that we have to expand opportunities for the community college. These are opportunities that would have a different environment for some of the young people who are not having a positive experience in their high school, that they're doing anything that they can to get out of that school. Because I will tell you, proximity to the Black community does not mean that there is not racism. In fact, it can be even hyper challenging there.
And to that point, Representative Taylor, let me probe that a little bit, because you are spot on from my perspective about parents and families looking for options for what to do with their children. Let me ask the question about why in the state of Washington are we not more supportive of Black charter schools? When we look at some of the schools that are in this area that are grossly underfunded and are not receiving public funds to help Black children, why is there a delta, if you will, in the funding for the community and for families who want their children, who want to have options for their children, number one? Let me stop there. Why are we not supporting Black charter schools and families that actually want to pull their children out of the system that is propelling children into prisons?
I see this as an increased by having I think a Black charter school. That is one option that some families may need or want as a means to educate their child, their students. But I also think that eliminates the accountability on the public education system to ensure that they are educating our Black children. And so if they have,
but if children are being murdered, and or if children, brown and Black children, are disproportionately arrested and disciplined in schools, where, if you heard my entry into the show, like how much longer can we afford to dance over this topic? Like this, look, I'm just putting it out there. Y'all know I'm candid about some of these issues. Like, are we thinking different about this? And before I pivot to the next topic, let me ask a final question, which is, does the Black community have a say-so in who the chair of the education committee is in the legislature? I could make a strong argument that most of the Black community is not satisfied with who we have chairing that committee, and we need a change so that we can change the outcomes for our children. So do we have a say-so in that, or what's the process to be able to do that?
I believe that the Black voice, our Black community, has input into all things legislature. I think the critical issue is, how do you access your legislator to, especially the one in your own particular district? We are not all concentrated in one a legislative district. In fact, we're spread across multiple counties. And I think there's an accountability that each legislator needs to bring to the table in terms of listening to the Black voices in their particular community. In terms of holding account of the chair of the education committee, or another person who's the chair of any committee that may implement policies that are against the Black community or anti-Black, we have to hold all of our chairs accountable to the Black community in our advocacy. How do we show up in support of Black leaders? How do we show up in support of Black elected officials? How do we show up in policy making as bills are being proposed, as they're being developed, as resources are being organized for our budget process? And then the other challenge is, how are those resources, once they are deployed or executed in the legislature, how are they deployed into community? Because I think there's just as much problem in the implementation of some of our policies that we put into our legislature. We will put in the intent and the accurate reflection of what our community is asking for. But when it gets to the implementation stage, all hell breaks loose. Like, folks lose their minds on how to do something basic and simple.
Let's bring Sean Good in. He's been patiently sitting in the waiting room because his work at Choose 180, I think, touches a lot of these areas. Sean, are you still with us here?
I am present and accounted for.
Do you have a perspective about this dialogue that's going on about education?
Yeah, I think that it's multifaceted, right? It's not simply education alone, because even when we graduate young people from high school and graduate them from college, even with graduate degrees, they're disproportionately likely to not end up in higher level positions within corporations. And in fact, the Black college graduate unemployment rate is twice of that of their white counterparts. So it's not only how do we get people to cross the high school stage, not only how do we get people to cross the college stage, but how do we make sure that there's equitable hiring practices in place that honor the brilliance of our young and talented Black children, in the same way that dominant culture is so often reflected in these businesses. I think that's one. The second thing I think about often too is this either or dynamic, right? Like, young people either graduate high school, or all the data tells us that if they don't cross that stage, then they're disproportionately likely to end up in the criminal legal system. That is absolutely true. And we look at that and we think, okay, well, the solution then is, how do we make sure that we get those young people across that stage? Which is also true. But also, why is it that we're so often criminalizing people who are living in poverty as a result of the conditions that they've grown up in, and thus penalizing them for things that are often beyond their control? And so
Correct.
I think we need to really look at it beyond just how do we make sure young people graduate, but how do we simultaneously make sure we're no longer criminalizing poverty in our community, so that way people who are struggling to make a living wage because they can't benefit from capitalism are having pathways for them that allow them to grow and be able to thrive in their community as well. I think that's really significant. I think it's unfortunate that we live in a region with so much wealth, and that all of our residents don't have access to housing, healthcare, and a living wage income. I think that's utterly ridiculous and deeply problematic. I think it's impossible to have a county where the average home price is $1 million. Meanwhile, you have people who are celebrating minimum wages that are around $16, $17 an hour. That doesn't seem equitable to me, and it doesn't seem like an incentive to go to college if you know that the only way to actually build wealth is if you have a high-paying, high-wage job, and the likelihood of you getting that is much shorter, much smaller if you're a Black, Indigenous person of color.
That's spot on, Sean. Thank you for that. Senator Dinger, are you able to update us on the governor's poverty reduction task force? Was it you who is a part of the task force? Or was it Senator Wilson?
Yes, Cindy, I've been a part of this task force for the last 3 years, and it really is about taking a look at poverty in our state, specifically about intergenerational poverty, what that looks like, why we have it, and what we can do about it. So one of the really cool things about this task force is that there are a lot of people with lived experiences who are really talking about what it means for people to exit poverty. And so those are the conversations we have to have, that as a state, it's not sufficient that we help people survive. It's how do we help people thrive? And so changing the conversation around government's role is about saying, how do you have a plan to exit poverty? How do we have a plan for wealth generation? Because if you don't want people to come back into poverty, you have to really have that conversation on how do you accumulate wealth. And we know that there are and have been basically very racist barriers and institutional barriers for Black and Brown people to generate wealth when it comes to owning homes or any kind of wealth generation that you take going back decades. And so we've made some really good progress in really the way we distribute benefits and services. And it really is about taking a look at the entire family and really developing a plan where they can exit poverty and then generate wealth so we don't have their children coming back into poverty.
I appreciate
Cindy,
that.
may I, Cindy? I just a quick follow up. I think like I struggle when I hear that we've made great progress. I mean, consider this, right? The Black body at the time that we were enslaved was valued. We were a monetary embodiment of money, but we never got to hold the money that we embodied. I mean, they were able to take insurance policies out on Black bodies. They were able to mortgage Black bodies. We've always been a wealth generating factor for capitalism ever since capitalism was invented in this country. And so it's difficult for me to think about the pace of change and wealth distribution if this country never actually acknowledges the harm that's been done and takes an intentional step to make repair through reparation. And I think as a state and as a region, we really need to begin to bring committees together to have earnest discussions about what it looks like for the state to make repair, for the county to make repair, for the city to make repair. Because we can't begin to build wealth from starting from so far behind. It's an unfair proposition for me to have for folks to have a 400-year head start in an effort to be able to catch up. Like, who does that, and why is that even a part of the conversation? This uplift suasion that is borrowed from like the old history of like a Booker T. Washington or the Talented 10. Like, that thing doesn't actually work for the collective us. It works for a small few. And I'm at a point of time where if we don't find a way to change the material condition that our families are living in, then we're going to continue to recycle talking points and have similar conversations without seeing significant change.
It's an excellent point and pivot that I'm going to go to, Sean. Thank you for that. Because that is, if you heard how I introduced the show, and the words that I use is that Black community deserves and demands progressive policies and systems that help repair us. And the small incremental steps that we're taking will never garner the results that we need. We are so far behind. And so to your point, Sean, and to our elected officials, what is the plan here in Washington State, since we are a state leading across this country around racial equity? What's the plan with community reinvestment? The dollars, are we thinking about in legislative session in January? Are we going to prioritize Black people? Senator Cooter, what do you think?
Thank you. Yes, I think we need to prioritize those who have been oppressed and been discriminated against. And I think, Sean had some really good points. I mean, it really is from your perspective, whether you've made progress or not, right? And I know that for us, when we're dealing with legislation, I mean, you're trying to move, a glacier. It's, the whole process is designed so that there is no progress. So, for example, for us to have passed the law that created the first in the country statewide right to counsel, I mean, that was against all odds. But we were able to do that. And that is part of looking at this on a spectrum, Cindy. We can't just look at one area like education. We talked about that. And some of the previous speakers have alluded to this. This really is a whole spectrum issue. And it's an income inequality issue. It is an issue of the redlining that we had for housing that Senator Dinger brought up. It's employment, missed employment opportunities. I mean, you were talking earlier about, what about the development of those who are in corporate America and how they get, sort of ceilinged, right? I saw that as a discrimination attorney. I saw how that would happen. and it happened enough times that it was clear there was a pattern here. So we have to look at the whole system, if you will, and we have to make changes as fast as we can, and as bold as we can, and and we have to work within the system that we have. And it is not a perfect system, I can tell you that. And as an example, I heard Rep. Taylor, Jamila, talk about the police accountability reform bills. That was a suite of bills, about a dozen that we passed. That, I think, was historic, to be able to get those passed. And there are many of us that don't want to go backwards on those. And we're fighting to make sure that we don't. So
Senator
there's
Taylor,
a lot of work ahead of us.
I'm going to go deeper into that with you. I appreciate those points that you brought up, because let me make a few statements here about income inequality. Let's talk about the fact that Black women are making still in 2022 53 cents to the white male dollar. That is a fact. So we are 50% behind in an inflation, in a crisis, in an inflation. Black people, Black women are disproportionately impacted by health, breast cancer, prominent 1 in 7 women are getting breast cancer, and we don't have access to health care. The income inequality, access, the ability to get into housing, like that's a number one of the ways that we build wealth. And here, I'm directing this question to you, but I'm also going to invite Craig Dawson in on this conversation too. In the 48th district where you are in one of the wealthiest area codes, and we as Black people are carrying the disproportionate amount of taxes, the percentage of our incomes going towards taxes, while the 48th district possesses a lot of people who don't pay income taxes. What's the plan for that? What are we doing about that? And Craig, if you could weigh in, what's the plan on how we will address finally the income inequality? And I'll let you both answer those questions.
Well, I can start, and we can talk about our tax structure. It's rated dead last in the country, and you're absolutely right. We have, the burden, the tax burden, if you will, of our system is borne by the lower end of the income spectrum, working families, low-income people, and it's because we have a regressive tax structure at its core. And all roads lead back to our tax structure. So what have we done? Well, we have been working around what I call one of the biggest obstacles to fair taxation in our state, which is the uniformity clause that's in our Constitution. It requires us, for example, to tax homeowners and residential property at the same rate as we do commercial property. So we can't differentiate because of the uniformity clause. So we also, so we know we need to deal with that. So we do workarounds. We do, property tax exemptions. We do, we carry it forward and as a lien against the property and freeze it for our seniors and disabled people and our veterans. That was the Senator Dingra bill. We do things like that. But we also did a big step within the last session, and not this last session, session before, and that's the capital gains tax. And that is a real big shift in how our state is looking at revenue generation. And that money will be earmarked for education, again, our paramount duty, and other essential needs. So, we're making some steps, again, within that process I talked about that's really, designed for you not to get anything passed. And I welcome, my colleagues to chime in and add any others that we've done. But we do intend to, we made the real estate excise tax progressive, as things like that. We've done those things in terms of our tax structure, but we have more work to do, clearly.
Can I chime in there?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
business in the Washington state pays 67% of the taxes. So to say that, to continue to say that it's regressive and individuals pay most of the taxes in Washington state, that's just not true. And property owners, if you have a valuable property, that has shown to be a way to actually get money into the system. Over the period of the last 20 years, Washington has been the best state to be both coming in and out of recession. And over the last 4 or 5 years, billions of dollars more into the tax coffers of Washington state because of the tax system that we currently have. So
So are you referring to small business, Craig?
I'm just referring to business in general. Business excise tax or business B&O tax pays 67% of the taxes in the state of Washington.
We also have a B&O
Uh,
system. We also have a B&O system where we actually give away more in B&O tax exemptions than we take in. And the burden of the B&O tax is placed on the backs of small business and mid-sized businesses.
Washington has fared better than any other state, and there's billions and billions of dollars over what has been forecast coming into Washington state. When we talk about how do we make it equitable, if you look at things like McCleary, all of those extra dollars went to the teachers. I'm not saying don't pay teachers, but Senator Dingler went through many issues of these children who need food, who need remediation. Those dollars should be going to those areas, right? I mean, it shouldn't all 100% go to the adults. It should go to making sure that these kids have an opportunity to learn and to be remediated where they have a deficit, right? And today, all those extra dollars are going to the adults because they're the ones that are lobbying. They're the ones that have the union. They're the ones that have the voice. And we're not listening to the kids, and we're not educating those kids and creating. I mean, in Washington, we have like 25,000 jobs a year that are deficit that could be going to high earners, and we're just not producing those folks because we're not taking the dollars that we have. It's not that we don't have dollars. Washington state has more money than it needs. It's just the way that those dollars are being allocated and who they're being allocated to. So that really needs to be looked at, and that's something that the legislators on this call can certainly have a way to parse those dollars into areas where you're going to get a return, where you're going to get equity for Black people. That's not happening today. It's basically going to the ones that are lobbying the teachers unions, that are lobbying to get those dollars versus going to really where it's needed to make our state ultra competitive.
I think I would like to just add, there's also a challenge in terms of when you have dollars that are focused on a particular community, like the Black community, there are attacks. So if we're trying to repair community, every time we're thinking about community reinvestment funds, $200 million is supposed to go by and for communities that are most impacted by the drug policies. And the first line of attack that people are making is that it should be distributed to everyone. So I-200, it should be distributed elsewhere. And so, my frustration with our system right now is that even when you make those targeted resource opportunities, and if you say, Black Home Initiative or Black, schools or what have you, then there are folks who, and I'm not saying Democrats, but I will say that there are folks who will attack any targeted resource that goes to communities most harmed by our policies of the past. They don't want to see it happen. So we really do need to think about how to protect those targeted resources that you're talking about. If you're saying have it targeted towards children, especially Black children, then how is it going to get into the hands of Black families without it being eroded into all lives matter? All lives matter.
Well, Representative Taylor, one of the things that Craig just said that is worth a little bit more commentary on is where these dollars are going with the teachers union. And I'm not a politician, so I'm not as mired into it as you all are. However, it's kind of no secret that they're the largest union out here and that they're controlling everything. And so if we as a Black community are saying that our Black children are not getting educated the way we want them to, if we are saying that there's money coming in and it's going to pay teachers who are not serving our children, if we're saying that we're putting money into the WEA, but we're not funding other options for education for Black kids, do we have a problem with the WEA?
So can I just
Representative.
jump in here really quickly? And one of the things I want to say is a statement that was made earlier, that the vast majority of teachers in our schools are white. And that is a fundamental problem. We have to get more diversity in our school system. The part of making sure this is a job that people want, because I will tell you that a lot of people of color want high paying jobs, is you have to have teachers that are paid a living wage, just like every other human being in whatever career they choose. They have to be paid a living wage. So making sure teachers are actually paid a decent salary is step one in making sure we are able to attract talented individuals to come into this field. The second thing we really have to take a look at is, where are these teachers coming from? What kind of outreach is happening, and what are the requirements to becoming a teacher? I asked my kids, like, how many teachers of color have they had in Lake Washington School District? They went through elementary public school, middle school, and high school, and I think they had like two people of color that taught them, and those were their Spanish teachers. So you have to pay people a decent wage. So this concept that it's the unions getting the money, that's not really true. Our teachers are paid well because we want teachers to be able to live in the communities in which they teach. They still can't afford to live in the communities that they teach, but we have to have an honest conversation on how are we attracting people to this career? How can we make sure there's more diversity in our teachers? And I think this is where we have to be very deliberate on recruiting and making sure we can keep people of color in this profession.
Senator Dinker, may I real quick, Cindy? I just want to say quickly that I think the way that we value labor in general is deeply problematic, and the fact that we have conversations about, well, teachers need to make a living wage. Well, anybody who's producing any kind of any labor is impacting our daily life deserves to make a living wage. And the fact that we can sit in 2022 and have conversations about who does and who doesn't deserve, I'm not saying that's the conversation we're having right now, but if we get to a place of a basic income where that basic income is a livable wage, then we can stop talking about who does or who doesn't want jobs, because we can guarantee you'll be able to live based upon the thing that you feel called to do. I don't know about you, but I am just as vested in the person who's fixing my car, or the person who's stocking the shelves at Amazon that's getting me my package in 24 hours, right? Like, all of these people deserve to have a living wage. Nobody in our community deserves to be without housing, healthcare, and a basic income. And if we reconcile that, then we don't have to talk about, well, who's getting what, because we'll all have enough. There's this narrative about a net zero game, particularly when it comes, Heather McGhee wrote a brilliant book about it called The Sum of Us. And it speaks to, particularly when it comes to doing for Black and brown communities, there's an assumption that it has to be at a loss of white communities when exhaustive studies prove otherwise. We can do this, and we can do this in a way that lifts all. We just have to get a place in a state that has 94% not Black people to understand that doing for the 6% means that everybody gets to benefit.
Oh, absolutely, Sean. You will not hear me disagree with you at all. And I think there are absolute policies where you really can lift everybody. And I think I said that it's not just about the teachers earning a living wage. It's about everybody, absolutely, without a doubt. But it's because we was talking specifically about teachers, I wanted to bring that up on their salaries. But absolutely, one of the things that happened during the pandemic, what was really interesting to me is when people said, who are essential workers? And guess what? It wasn't the engineers who were the essential workers. It was the people who were working in our grocery stores. It was our nurses. It was the people who were doing the deliveries. And so this concept of who's valued and who's not, I really do hope that COVID opened a lot of people's eyes to understand that essential workers are the people that do the hard work in making sure our world functions. And it is not necessarily those people who have high degrees. It's the people who are taking care of others. So you're absolutely right. We have to change that conversation on the value, which frankly, you're right, capitalism places on people. And this goes back to Cindy's point about Black women earning 53 cents, right? They're working a lot harder because they're doing a job that pays, and they're taking care of their families and taking care of the kids and running a household. All of that in our society is unpaid labor. And we have Black women, and then we have other women of color, and we have white women, and women are still doing so much of the unpaid labor in our society.
Senator Wilson, you had something. I'm sorry it
Well,
took me so long to get to you. You wanted to
yeah,
add
that's
to this?
yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to just chime in, sitting on education and having been in education the last 40 years, really thinking about the 294 school boards across our state and how critically important a role they play in this conversation. For even what we do at the state level has to go to the local boards. And that's oftentimes where we struggle when we think about things related in particular to our Black and brown students, our communities of color, our immigrant refugee students, our students who come to school and identify gender fluid. And so it is one of those things we really have to pay a lot of attention to. I wanted to say also, as we think about teachers, there was work done in 2021 where we repealed EdTPA, which was one of the tests that was a test that teachers had to take in addition to being recommended by a prep program, in addition to meeting and exceeding competencies. It was one more barrier to keep individuals from being in the classroom, and in particular, individuals of color. And so that was something that was removed. But we have to continue to look at our teacher training programs. We have to continue to look at all of those, again, systems that were put in place not to help people advance, but to keep people from getting where they needed to be. So just really, as we think about funding formulas, that would be the only other thing I wanted to talk about, is that as we think about how it is we fund and whether money follows kids or whatever, we have funding formulas that are inherently inequitable. In my community, our folks make $10,000 less than someone 5 blocks away, fifth most diverse school district in the nation, have less money coming in, fewer folks able to have living wage jobs. I mean, those kinds of inequities we've got to continue to work on. And those are the go big and go home. Those are not things we can continue to just incrementally push along. And then the only other thing I wanted to add was guaranteed basic income is a conversation that has been ongoing and that you will see continue as we think about what do individual needs from the very beginning to succeed. So thanks for letting me add those few things.
Thank you. Senator Cooter, you had something to add as well.
Yeah, I would just like to point out that, you know, the issue of pay, fair pay, living wage is not just the state's issue, it's also the private sector's issue. And so the teachers are public employees. And so we do have an obligation to make sure and lead by example that they have a living wage. And they're not our enemy in this process. They're our partner. And they're critical to making sure that our students are educated and have the best chance, to succeed in their lives. And, and to Craig's point, and Craig, you and I are talking about two different things when we talk about our tax structure. When I was talking about it being burdened on the lower income folks, I'm talking about the fact that they pay, 6 times more of their income in taxes than the upper 1%. And that makes it much more difficult for them to get ahead. And we have been rated dead last by the Economic Opportunity Institute in terms of tax equity in our state. And I think that says a lot about the fact that we do tax in a regressive form, and all roads lead back to that. And that's really the key to helping us generate the income we need in order to fully fund our education system. And remember too, we have 3 different budgets. So there is a budget. The operating budget is the one that will pay teachers' salaries and that sort of thing. But then you've got the capital budget that goes to capital improvements. Those are 2 separate buckets of money that go into schools. And I think we need to be looking at both, and we do need to do much more to modernize our schools.
Thank you, Senator Cooter. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be back in just 2 minutes and wrap this show for the evening.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Trey Holiday, and I am so excited that Converge Media is doing another takeover at Paramount Theater. That's right. We're going to be there on the 24th and 25th of this month, and I am elated because we have a great relationship with STG and the whole team at Paramount, so I'm so excited for that. And y'all know this is personal for me because my daddy would be so proud to see his daughter's name on the marquee once again. One of the big moments that we were able to share before he passed was when he saw me right there on that stage presenting me with flowers. He and my mother are so proud of all the things that I've been able to do, and Paramount is a major part of that. So please join us, you guys, on the 24th and 25th. Get your tickets today by going to whereweconverge.com/Paramount. Be a part of our live studio audience as we make history once again.
Community, it's been 3 years since we've been able to celebrate in person at our annual Evening of Choice. And this year at Access in Pioneer Square on October 19th at 6 p.m., we will be back together again, celebrating our journey, healing towards justice. This past couple of years have been incredibly difficult for our young people and our community at large. And one thing that has become clear and absolutely true is there's one way forward that brings all of us together, and that's as we heal. And when our young people heal, they're truly able to become who it is they've been purposed to be. So on this evening, you'll hear stories of our young people, hear the evolution of our organization as we emphasize healing in our cause. And together we will celebrate another year of impact and growth as we journey towards justice together. Again, it's at Access in Pioneer Square, 6 p.m. on October 19th, and live streaming will be available through YouTube at I Choose 180.
Welcome back to HeartBeat Special All Things Black. I'm your host, Cindi Bright, this evening. We've had a lively discussion with several of our elected officials and with our business community, all focused on Black issues. And we could talk about this till the sun sets. I know we all could, because there's so much to talk about. And we just have a few minutes left in the show. I wanted to make sure we got to let's bring Craig Dawson back on, because we haven't talked about Black business recovery. And Craig, I know last time I had you on the show, you had given some numbers about Black business, GDP spend on Black business. Can you give us like a 2-minute overview of where you feel we are in the state of Washington on Black businesses?
Certainly. So in the state of Washington, 0.5% of all the businesses in the state are owned by Black people, and 0.2% of their revenue go to those Black businesses. So that means GDP in the state of Washington, $660 billion, $1.2 billion goes to Black businesses. If we were representative of the state, that would be about $24 billion. So that's 24 times. That's where we need to get to. We really need to make progress as it relates to opportunities for Black businesses to get contracts. And we need to make progress of hiring Black people. A lot of entrepreneurs come from working from somebody else, getting an idea of how to do that work, and then building a better widget. And so if we don't get those Black people into the stream and get them up and into these businesses where they can learn how to make something, how to grow something, then we'll never get the chance really to bring equity to Black people. And in America, it's really all about capitalism. I mean, it's really about, hey, how can you be part of the part of our society? And it's not a zero-sum game. It's, if you add Black people, if they have a chance to grow their businesses, to grow their net worth, to grow their generational wealth, it adds to the entire pie for everybody else. Because you grow a business, now this business can buy more stuff from Amazon and more stuff from Microsoft. They can send their kids to college. They can send them to private school. They can put food on the table, and they can give the next generation that chance to grow. When you talk about, sort of this generational poverty, it's because 0.2% of the revenue in the state of Washington goes to Black families. Those Black business owners are Black families. And on the flip side, if you look at white business owners, they're driving, really 98% of the revenue. to their families. So that's really the difference. And we've got to make a stand right now. If we don't do it today, we'll be in the same place that we are 50 years from now.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Craig. When you said that on my show, I don't know, earlier this year when you were on, it's a stagnant number, and it's an important number to put out there because it often feels like, again, my opening statements around incremental steps, even a $200 million community reinvestment it's pennies, and it's not what Black community needs. And so how do we, most of my listeners know I have a small business too. Our businesses were harmed disproportionately in COVID. The processes and systems that were put in place didn't touch many of us micro businesses, and we're still out here. And so I beg and plead with our elected officials that we have to prioritize and focus on Black business and earning power for Black people. This is a must. Look, we've just got a couple minutes left in the show. I really wanted to talk more about the labor movement. I'm just going to throw a couple things out there for people to think about. I wanted to ask the question, is the social contract between employer and employee forever broken? The movement that we see happening across this country with the labor movements, the unionization, the issues are people have stepped up and are swinging and fighting for our rights to live, not just struggle to get by, not just survive, but we deserve and demand equitable splits on profitability inside of companies. We deserve and demand that our legislator prioritize our lives, our health, our earning power, the systems that are out here that are tearing our lives apart. I will give each of you 30 seconds to just do a final comment. I want to thank every one of our legislators and business community for coming on with us tonight to have this necessary conversation as ballots are dropping tomorrow. So let me start with you, Craig. Do you have a couple of thoughts you want to leave with the community this evening?
I just think it starts with education. All the things that we're talking about today, if we educate our kids, if we educate our Black kids, if we prioritize the capital to remediate their needs, then we can succeed as a state, as a country.
Thank you. Sean, do you have some final thoughts?
Sure thing. Really significant election coming up for the prosecuting attorney. As a Black community, we've historically, often by the persuasion of others, done harm unintentionally. James Foreman Jr. writes an incredible book about this as it pertains to the tough on crime laws that we, in effort to keep drugs from spreading in our communities, voted for tough on crime drug laws that ended up incarcerating more of our Black bodies. So we need to be intentional in a campaign like this, that we don't fall for the dog whistle of keeping communities safe that really just alludes to incarcerating more people who are living in poverty and suffering from mental health conditions. We need more access to restorative practices and programs that sees the full humanity of our Black and brown brothers, sisters, and non-binary siblings.
Thank you for that. Representative Jamila Taylor, final thoughts?
What I would say is that we have to do everything. I mean, at this point in juncture, we have repair to do inside of economic development, inside of education, inside of healthcare, and how we remain committed to keeping Black folks at the table and receiving the benefits of the policies that we're setting out. So our advocacy often works well for other communities. We cannot be left out of the conversation when it's time to deploy the resources.
Thank you for that. President Carolyn Payne, NAACP, final thoughts? We can't hear you, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. As a community, we must do what we do more than what we've already been doing. We must get out. We must vote. We must vote our conscience. We must vote for people that are working for us, because everybody that looks like us is not for us anyway. And we need to stay on top of that. And we need to make sure that we demand, as a community, come together and demand the rights for our children to be educated, not to be incarcerated, equity, and a living wage. We cannot move forward when we don't have money to buy food to put on the table.
Thank you for that so much. Senator Kuderer.
Thank you, Cindy. It was really a pleasure to be with everyone. I would say that, from the state perspective, the best investments we can make with our resources is in education and healthcare and in access to housing. And I think those three things will go farther than almost any other investments we can make.
Thank you. Senator Dingra.
Thank you, Cindy. It's been such a pleasure to be here. And I'll just add, just 5 years ago, when I got elected to office, I doubled the women of color in the Senate from 1 to 2. This is why who we elect, who we support makes a big difference, because we are the people who are sitting at the decision-making table. And you got to have more people who share similar values. And so I cannot, again, stress how important it is to vote, because you've got to have people at the table who can make the decisions that need to be made. And this is an issue that we need our private corporations and industry to partner with us, because like you said, Black women are still paid 53 cents. So it's not just a solution that it lies at the feet of government. We really have to make sure we're talking about equity around the entire spectrum. And it is everyone's burden to make sure we're doing it right.
Thank you for that. And last but not least, Senator Wilson.
Well, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks so much for letting me join you tonight. I would say that I'm a woman who identifies, but I'm also a woman who walks with privilege. And I use that privilege every day, not to be a voice for others, but to create the space for others and to be called an ally in the hopes that I can create the places to have access, opportunity, and voice that we talked about we're missing today. So both in my role in education, but also in my role in human services, rehab, and reentry, it's critically important that we do what we say we need to do to make things right, because they've been wrong for far, far too long. So I look forward to working with Sean and with Craig and with all of you to continue to be a disruptor in our systems. So thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you for everyone, all of our guests who joined us tonight here at Converge Media. Thank you to our viewers and listeners who followed this tonight. Please, whatever you do, get out to vote this session. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.